we would like to take a moment to thank the organizers, particularly to thank the GID for being so gracious in helping us schedule our presentations all on one day because of our schedule. So we really appreciate all that you've done for us. Thank you.
We really do appreciate that, Maggie. Thank you very much. As they mentioned, we are from University of Central Florida. Orlando is actually our home. Yeah, as probably some of you already know, University of Central Florida is right now the second largest university in the country, 60,000 plus. And from the grapevine, I heard that part of the legacy of our president is going to be, we're going to be probably the largest. The largest is right in my home state of Arizona. Arizona State with 72,000. So that means we have another 12,000 to go. All right. That means it's going to be quite challenging to find parking spots there, if it's not right now. Okay, well, Madelyn, would you like to start? I think you have to get closer to this mic, so yeah, because there is only one mic.
Can everyone hear me when I'm
not
you can hear us? To the mic? Okay,
yeah, because I'm a loudmouth, but she's
like
the soft-spoken
one.
And the mic is to hold your feet.
Oh, I see. Okay, got it. All right. So it's hard for me to stand still when I talk or teach stuff. We've worked together for many years, and we want to share with you some of the intercultural and interdisciplinary work that we've done. And before we begin talking about what we've done, we wanted to begin talking about some definitions of our terms. The first speaker talked beautifully about what happens in universities and how we don't always agree on our terms, even within our own discipline, let alone across disciplines. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what we mean when we use these terms. And obviously, a very simple definition of interdisciplinarity is simply the integration of disciplinary perspectives. In an empirical study of interdisciplinary research and teaching, Latuka derived a topology of 4 different forms of interdisciplinarity. The first is informed, and that's simply instruction in a single discipline where other disciplines are called upon to enrich the course content. For example, I teach technical communication, so I might include, when I'm teaching document design, I might include some theories from graphic design to inform what I'm teaching my students about document design. Another approach is transdisciplinarity, and that is simply not focusing on the source of a method or a theory, but applying it across disciplines. Then there is conceptual interdisciplinarity, which would be looking at theories from many different disciplines, but not privileging any one discipline. And finally, there is what Latuka calls synthetic interdisciplinarity. And that is the kind of work that Houman and I have done, where teachers from 2 distinct disciplines, and we have 2 quite different disciplines.
Absolutely.
Where teachers from 2 very different disciplines take those theories, methods, and concepts from their different disciplines and find a way to combine them in a course that they're teaching. And that's what we've done. We also wanted to talk a little bit about culture because we've also done a lot of intercultural work. And there are multiple definitions, many definitions out there of culture, but we wanted to focus on some key aspects that most of the definitions agree on. One is the fact that culture is learned. That if a baby is born here in the US today but adopted by parents in another culture and taken to that other culture, that baby is going to learn whatever culture he or she grows up in. So culture is not necessarily a given. It's something that we learn. Also, culture is the shared perceptions and values of a group. And that is often expressed as behavior. In other words, the way we greet people, the way we interact with one another, what we consider normal, what we consider inappropriate behavior. All of those things are things that we absorb growing up in a culture and that we take to be the norm. And finally, culture is very dynamic and adaptive. And when we talk about this with students, one easy way to do this is to talk about, well, you know, you've seen movies set in the 50s in the US. Is the US culture anything like that now? No, obviously it's quite different. So that's a good way to think about changes in culture over time. And one reason it's really important to recognize that culture is adaptive is the fact that when we teach students or when students learn about other cultures and engage with other cultures, there's a danger that they'll just memorize facts. Well, people in this culture do this, people in that culture are like that, and that can be really reductive, and that's something that we try very hard to avoid in our teaching. So what we want to do is make students understand that culture is always changing, just like our own culture is always changing. And one reason I emphasize those particular points is because I would argue that those points apply to our disciplines, that we can view our disciplines as cultures. And when we study a certain field, when we go into a certain area of research, we're learning. We're learning the way people do research. We're learning what's accepted, what's important, what's not valued. We are sharing those values, although we may have disagreements with our peers, we are sharing certain values with our colleagues within that discipline. We are expressing that in behavior, the way we teach, the way we do our research. All of that is expressed as behavior. And obviously, disciplines change over time. So again, it's very much like the definition of culture that we're working from. And that's why we feel, and we were talking about this at breakfast earlier, that interdisciplinary studies and intercultural studies really are very similar.
Well, my colleague highlighted a lot of things that we both believe in. The earlier presenter was talking about sometimes it's very difficult to get colleagues from different colleges to work together. We know quite a bit about that. We used to be, as you know, UCF is going through a lot of changes in the last 20 years or so. We haven't been there 20 years, but I mean, we've been around for a good part of it, yeah, to get the feel for it. We used to be, Madelyn and I used to be actually in the same college, College of Arts and Sciences. And because we grew so much, we are right now working in two completely different colleges with two completely different missions and everything. We're not complaining, we're just telling you it's kind of challenging. So we agree with you 100%. Then earlier, we had a conversation during our breakfast meeting with one of the colleagues who was just kind of complaining a little bit about, is that right? Or expressing, not complaining, is that right? A little about some of the challenges which is going on between his country and our country. And one of the things I would like to say, I mean, it kind of is cliche to a degree, to say that, we are living in a really different world. We are not in Kansas anymore, okay? I think gone are the good old days of Cold War, when it was very, very clear who's your friend, who's your enemy. We were we were wearing the white hats like in this old Western movies. You always, and it didn't matter what time you walk into a Western movie, you would know who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. Is that right? The guy with the white Stetson is the good guy. The guy with the black Stetson was was the bad guy. It was very clear. Nowadays, that's not really so clear. Part of it is because technology and technological revolution has empowered people. So a side effect of it, the way the earlier presenter was talking about, there are sometimes it creates challenges, or what I like to call opportunities for growth. Is that right? So one of these challenges, basically, in terms of technology, has been high mobility. Well, is that good, bad? Well, it has implication, obviously, for us as faculty members, because it increases our challenge to train a new generation of students. And let me tell you, those of you who are in the teaching business, you already know. Teaching nowadays is very, very different, and every year is getting more and more different. Is that right? I mean, these students are very different from us. We used to go over there. I remember when I got admitted to University of Virginia, I was so excited because I was coming from the Cowboy State, Arizona, and my parents, they thought they were going to send me to become a gentleman. So I went to, I'm sitting in this grad school, a seminar, and I was so excited. This very, very famous professor, I would not mention until he passes by, is that right? There we go, was talking about Cold War theory. So he sat down over there, he opened his book, he started basically reading from it. I thought, oh, wait a minute. Maybe he's trying to get your attention. Sometimes, faculty members, they do some weird stuff, they think it's cool, so we are paying attention. No, he's reading, he's not making any kind of eye contact. If I do things like that, I get fired, I mean, it's just like, because teaching has become so much more complicated and so much more competitive. Anyway, the new generation of students, they are not the type of student, you sit over there, you just say, these are the theories, give them books that they do not have any kind of, pictures or anything, you're not entertaining them, and you're lecturing for more than 20 minutes. The research shows you have their attention for 15 to 20 minutes. Every 15 to 20 minutes, you have to tell a joke, get it distracted, get them back, for another 15 to 20 minutes or something like that to go on. So technology is making it kind of more challenging because if you don't have their attention, they have their cell phone, they're either in text messaging, their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever else, taking probably pictures of weird activities you do and putting it on the YouTube. You never know. You see what I mean? So there are advantages to it. There are also what disadvantages. We like to think about the opportunities, as I mentioned, for growth. So one of the other things about the technological aspect is a lot of local issues, okay, local problems can easily become national or global. It's becoming very hard to to separate those, and at the same time to deal with them or to come up with a solution is not an easy just to look at it from one perspective. And that's again another opportunity for what interdisciplinary type of studies that we are doing. Well, we put some examples of that, like immigration, international business, which we are not going to go any further into it because we thought the previous presenter did an excellent job in that regard. So having said that, let's move on to the next one. And here, again, we are talking about one thing for sure, about the global environment we are living in is there is a lot more interaction among people with diverse, cultural background. Now, people have a tendency to think, oh, this is positive. Well, it could be positive, but it can have also a negative impact. For example, if you are communicating with somebody, not, being mindful of how they respond, you can actually cause international incidents. So I mean, those are some of the issues. So we have dealt with actually some of these in that book, that we wrote together, Intercultural Communication. So cultural sensitivity is very important because it's obviously very important to to take care of educated people, but educated people can be very difficult to in a way deal with and to govern. Especially when it comes to the cultural aspect of it. And this is becoming a very sensitive issue. As you know, there are a lot of right now diversity training, internationalization, whatever they like to call it right now on all campuses everywhere. What does all this mean? All of this mean from a perspective of somebody who's a teacher and a scholar could be also an opportunity for what? Collaborative research, using technologies. Madelyn has done that. We're going to talk about this one further in the future slides. I've done a number of this one. And all of this will hopefully helps a little bit to increase the understanding of not just our students who are basically our audience or the other audiences we deal with, because we do also a lot of workshops and everything, but also even ourselves. One of the other things that I like to kind of emphasize in this regard before we move on to some other things that Madelyn is going to talk about is in terms of focusing in our students. Our students nowadays, they really need, especially from our perspective, they need to do a lot of critical thinking, okay? They're so much used to whatever they do not know something, they just put it over there in Google or some other, search engine, and they find it and they think, oh, they come to me, they say, Dr. Sadri, I said, what is the source of your information? Oh, it was on internet. It sounds like, it was on Bible or something. They're not questioning things, and, in fact, this has led our department, and I'm not criticizing because I know that some of the people in some of the other department, they have a completely different view of it, that in our department, even though we haven't made it official, we have a very, for example, how should I put it, negative perspective as far as places like Wikipedia is concerned. Because for an undergraduate student who doesn't know, in terms of information fluency, what is useful information, what is loaded information, what is, not, etc., that's a very challenging source to use. Now, by the time they get to the grad school, we have indoctrinated them enough that they will know how to choose what. But for undergraduates, it's kind of challenging. So, for example, our department, political science, does not think very highly of it. But when I talk with a number of people in different departments, including some in English department, they say, no, it's a great source. So I'm not disputing it, but
Who are those people?
Yeah.
I need to talk to them.
Well, in addition to you, I wasn't mentioning. So, so this is a very important one. Ability to look at global, events from an interdisciplinary perspective. I mean, any issue now you talk about. Right now, Ukraine is a very hot issue. Is that right? What does it mean? I've been, in fact, I had a recent, assignment in my classes, getting students to look at it from a U.S. perspective, then from a Russian perspective, then from a Ukrainian perspective, and from a European perspective. these are students that eventually, if they like it or not, they have to work with people from other parts of the world. My colleague, Madelyn, has a tremendous amount of experience actually in creating what we call virtual teams, and she's going to talk about some of this. Some of it maybe today, some of it actually later on today in one of the other presentations. So these are some of the trainings they absolutely need to get. And last but certainly not least is, I think there is tremendous amount of academic and scientific growth for people that they put themselves outside their comfort zone, outside their environment. And that's another opportunity that we provide.
So we've been talking, and we were talking this morning, and we're always talking about why don't we see more interdisciplinary education? Why don't we see more intercultural education? Well, it can be very challenging. It can mean more work for our students, particularly. I think we'll do. Yeah. We taught 3 interdisciplinary courses together, and often the students who would enroll in those courses would either be English majors studying technical communication or political science majors studying international relations. However, we would also get other majors in there, other students, and what we found, and the research bears this out, is that in an interdisciplinary course, those students who are majoring in one of the 2 disciplines do a lot better in the course and have a much better experience than those students who are not majoring in either discipline. Because it's a lot for students to take in concepts and theories from 2 disciplines and apply them all at the same time. So that's one reason I think why it's more challenging for students. And Houman was talking about moving outside your cultural comfort zone and crossing disciplinary boundaries. And for students, that can be a lot of work. One thing that we require in all the classes that we've taught, and I certainly do in my other classes as well, and I'm sure you do, Houman, is that students don't only use U.S. research sources. We require that they use non-U.S. sources to do their research so that they are exposed to these other perspectives. And that's really important. I mentioned earlier that when we have students learning about other cultures, we don't want it to become reductive. In other words, we don't want it to just be memorizing some facts about another culture. However, one thing that we can do that is really effective and works well with students, even if they don't know anything about another culture or any other culture besides their own, is to teach them the concept of mindfulness. And Stella Ting Toomey has written a lot about mindfulness in intercultural communication, and what she says is that a mindful communicator is someone who creates a feeling of being supported, respected, and understood in the person with whom he or she is communicating. And that's a really valuable approach with students, because even if they don't know anything about another culture, when they're interacting with people from other cultures, if they take the time to open their mind and have awareness of other perspectives, the exchange is going to be a lot more effective. And we found that to be true when we put our students in situations where they had to interact with people from other cultures, that just having that mindset can go a long way, even for somebody who doesn't know a lot about another culture. In the virtual team projects that I've done and that Houman has done, the other thing that we do is we challenge students to use technology in meaningful ways to communicate. And our students know a lot about technology, right? They know a lot more than we do probably in many cases, but that doesn't mean that they know how to use it effectively to achieve particular goals or tasks in the workplace. And one thing that I found in some virtual team projects that I've done is at the very beginning of the project, the students tell me, well, for our team communication, we're going to use Facebook because they like Facebook, But very soon that goes by the wayside and they're using other means of communication, because even though they like Facebook, they realize it's not the most effective and most efficient way for them to communicate. So the other thing that we both feel is really important is we've talked about what it means to be globally competent and how important it is to prepare our students to be globally competent, but how do we get them to be globally competent? It's not just having them learn certain skills. That certainly helps, and we want them to accomplish various skills, but what really helps is to put them in a situation where they have to apply those skills. We all know that when we do something, we retain a lot more and we learn a lot more than we just have someone tell us. right? If you hear somebody tell you it may go in, it may not go in, it may stick, it may be gone tomorrow. But if you're involved in a long-term project where you have to use these skills, you're going to remember. You're going to remember what went well and what didn't go well. And, you know, we always have the students reflect so they can think, well, you know, if I had done this at the beginning of the project, that whole project would have gone a lot more smoothly. So the experiential learning is very valuable. And two ways we get at that is through service learning projects and virtual team projects. And we've both done quite a few of each. In a course that we taught together called Global Perspectives, it was an interdisciplinary honors seminar, and we began the semester by having guest speakers from a lot of local organizations with global missions come and talk to the students about the missions of their organizations. What I mean by that is, for example, the United Nations Association's local chapter, Amnesty International's local chapter. We had someone from the International Visitor Center. As I'm sure most of you know or can imagine, Orlando gets a lot of international visitors every year. And a lot of them come to the UCF campus, to tour the campus. So students act as guides when people come on campus. So the students were broken into small teams of 3 or 4 students. And after hearing all the presentations from the various speakers, each team decided which organization they wanted to volunteer to do a documentation project for. And we had some really successful projects come out of that class. One concern that the United Nations Association had was that students often didn't learn about the UN until they were in high school, or in some cases even until they were in college. So they wanted students to learn about the UN at a younger age. And so what the one student team did was develop a curriculum to teach 5th grade students about the United Nations. And not only did they develop the curriculum, they did the research, they wrote it, and then they went into a class and taught it. So that was a great learning experience for the students. And also, as you can see, a lot of our projects are also geared toward not just having the students learn and expand their horizons, but to create something that will help inform others in some way about some global issue. Another successful project was a website that the students did for the Office of Diversity and for the Office of International Studies at our university. They created a website called UCF Celebrates Diversity. And the website had information about various holidays and rites of passage celebrated by members of the UCF community. And as Houman mentioned, we have a very large community. We have a very diverse community. So there were all sorts of holidays represented. And some of you may be thinking, well, that doesn't really sound like a very serious thing. Like, how is that really a global issue? But the idea behind that was that if people in our community could share how they celebrate things, what's important to them, how they celebrate holidays with their family, that would in turn give people a better understanding of one another, which could lead to more harmony. And the website was set up not only so that the students had certain information that they placed on there about various holidays that they researched and they interviewed people, but it was also set up so that people could go on and say, well, in my family, this is how we celebrate this holiday, or in my culture, this is what we do.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, the previous presenter talked about some of the challenges that people want to collaborate with one another from different, from outside their own college or departments, etc. I think that's a very important issue to deal with because, everything that, my colleague talked about in terms of enriching the students, etc., project that we talked about is important, but who's supposed to do it? The teachers. Is that right? So here I want to just use a few words about, challenges faced by us teachers. Well, one of, I think, a very important thing is either, as the previous, speaker mentioned, you have to kind of basically go through that whole lobotomy and completely start changing yourself if you want to be innovative or something, or if you stay outside your comfort zone and find people that they can, in some ways or one another, they can complete, what you want to do, or complement at least what you want to do. And that was, I think the best example of that is the collaboration that, Madelyn and I started doing. We actually met each other during one of these summer faculty workshops. You know, I mean, how would a political scientist meet somebody from English department? You know, these guys are always much larger department. They have different mission. Our mission is very, very different, etc., etc. So when I was listening to her presentation, and you know, when she listened to some of my you know, project and everything, we actually found a way that maybe we could work together. And even though the nature of our work is very different. Well, English classes, they have basically a ceiling. There's a lot of writing assignment. The student to professor ratio is much more, how should I put it, friendlier. Is that right? It's not like, for example, when I walk to a class, I have 100 students now. I teach what they call these V courses. I go to a studio, there are 50 students sitting over there, and my lecture is being actually videotaped, and immediately following the the end of the lecture, it's being streamed online. So another 50 students over there. I teach 3 of these classes this semester. I have 300 students. So I was thinking, I love the type of assignment she's talking about, but how am I going to be doing that? Because the type of assignment she's talking about, there's a lot of writing. And in my field, the amount of writing is decreasing. At the beginning, when they hired me, my classes were 24, 25 students. Well, we could afford having a paper for every student. But when you have 100 students in every class, 300 students, even a 15 to 20 page paper becomes something very challenging. But we found a way to actually do that, because we didn't want to shortchange the student just because of some of the challenges that our institution has. Another thing is finding appropriate projects. How to do it. We have done that one, between the 2 of us, and also, as she's going to talk about a little bit later, we have actually done it with colleagues from outside UCF, in fact, outside the country. We have experience working with universities in Ireland, in Belgium, in France, and last but not least, actually in Russia. All right? And one of the other thing, again, is, which is providing us, teachers, not with a challenge, but with opportunity for growth, would be just, again, moving away from our for discipline comfort zone.
And I've certainly learned a lot about international relations, working
maybe
with
more than what you want to know. Go ahead.
And I would say right here today, if you're thinking that you might want to do something interdisciplinary or international, this is a great opportunity. All of the colleagues that Houman and I work with, and we're going to talk about a group that we've created at our university, and all the international colleagues that I've worked with at least, I've met at conferences. It's a great opportunity to meet people and in an informal setting. And I can't stress enough, again, based on my experience, and I think yours has been similar, Houman, that even if you find someone you want to work with, you don't want to just meet and say, great, let's work together. You want to get to know that person. You want to know what their teaching philosophy is. You want to know what their goals for the courses that they teach are. You want to know what constraints they have. Are they really burdened down with a lot of administrative work, or do they have a large number of students in their classes? You need to know those things, because if you go in blindly, you may be very unhappy with the result. I have colleagues who I've worked with in Ireland since 2006. We spent a year and a half before we did our first collaboration, really getting to know one another. And research has shown, research on virtual team projects, that most of the time when virtual team projects fail, they don't fail because of a breakdown in communication among students. They fail because of breakdown of communication among faculty.
Exactly.
But that is really crucial to success. So developing meaningful projects, as you may have noticed just from the brief things that we've said, all of our projects have a global focus at a local level, obviously, and all of our projects are geared toward disseminating information about global issues into the community, and they're geared toward really doing something that someone somewhere is going to use. They're real-world projects. They may be for the university, but they're still things that somebody at the university is really going to use. So I think that is a key to our success as well. I mentioned, getting to know people, bridging theoretical differences. Again, the best way to do that is to spend a lot of time talking and getting to know each other. And document your success. The book that Houman and I wrote came out of our collaboration. Like many teachers, we were teaching classes and there was no good book to use, so we wrote one. And I'm now in the process of doing that with my colleagues at the University of Limerick. We're writing a book on virtual teams. So it can lead to a lot of research. It can lead to a lot of presentation. It can lead to a lot of lasting friendships.
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, in terms of learning, who you should, communicate with and, collaborate with. I agree 100% with Madelyn, because I had experience that we were going to talk about, like with, university in Belgium, Ghent University, very good university. One of the lessons I learned that you need to, cooperate with the main professors over there, as opposed to, for example, maybe assistants or lower level, because those guys, they come and go, and then when they go, the project, is basically has ended. And one of the things that Madelyn did was she actually focused on two people who knew that they're going to stay over there, they have a life, and that sometimes works. I've done the same thing with, with some of the Russian universities, and that collaboration stays. In a way, already we have talked about some of the courses that we have taught together, even though our fields are so different. Our very first course, Global Perspective, was actually adopted by the university and our department as a required course for all the students who are in the track of what we call Global International Studies track, which is the largest major in the field of political science. That's very, very interdisciplinary, as we have mentioned.
And to go along with what our first speaker was saying, it's interesting that although we developed the course, neither one of us has ever been asked to teach it.
So, and then in the interdisciplinary teams that Madelyn was talking about, I think again that's a great usually opportunity. And, to be honest with you, teaching sometimes the same course over and over, we get bored, don't we? I mean, we can change the book, we can change our lecture a little bit, but sometimes working with somebody else, especially if they're from a different discipline, you learn a whole lot. So that has been basically our experience. And of course, international collaboration comes with it a little bit more. We're going to talk about that one right now, actually.
Okay, and we actually kind of talked about the global perspectives and the honors seminar, the projects that we did, and all of the projects that we did were projects either for the university or for the local community that were actually used. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really key, because the stakes are much higher for students. They're much more engaged, and they're very excited. Our students were very excited to think that what they were creating was going to be on a website for the entire university. We've actually done a project where we did a website for the University of Limerick's technical communication program. So my students were very engaged in that. They were really excited to think that work that they were doing was going to be on the University of Limerick's website. So it means a lot to them, and they're so excited that this is something they can put in their portfolios when they go look for jobs, and it really does give them an edge. I've gotten a lot of feedback, and I'm sure you have too.
Exactly. That's actually one of the key issues about this generation. You already probably know it. They're not like our generation, so theory-oriented. They usually think about, okay, what does it have to do with me? They're usually thinking about the practical aspect of it. So when you get them to work on these assignments that they have some kind of practical, dimension, they love it. And I know that in business college, I guess that's a challenge, isn't it? Because from one side, at least I know from our business school, that they have a series of specified journals that if they want to do real research, it has to be in those journals. Is that right? From the other side, the practical dimension of it goes very much against it, because you're right. When you think about, okay, let's place this person in such and such company and then talk about it. Well, we have done the same type of things, with some of the local non-profits, or, for-profit organization, etc. And the experience was very different, and it was actually very enriching. And I think really there should be a lot more publication in that area. In our school right now, they're actually promoting an area called, SOTEL, which is Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And I think even if the business school traditionally doesn't accept those type of things, there are a lot of journals that they would actually take, projects like that.
So one thing that we haven't talked about yet is our interdisciplinary team that we created at the University of Central Florida. We're currently working with 2 faculty members from the School of Communication. We also had a faculty member from the College of Education who unfortunately left, so she's no longer part of our team. And we're looking to expand. In fact, I met someone at a conference last week who may join our team, who's also from the College of Education. And so what we did, again, is we spent a lot of time getting to know one another and finding out areas of overlap in our research, our interests, and we have given many conference presentations together with our colleagues from communication. We have published a journal article with them last year, and we're currently working on a grant to get funding to develop courses that focus on communication and power specifically, because those are areas that we all agree are important. And we want to develop courses and assignments that can be used for students in STEM courses.
Exactly. And actually what Madelyn is talking about, especially emphasized in our book, this was not a project like an overnight project. Very frankly, this is the result of, I wouldn't say how many years, is that right?
Quite a
but
few.
Several years of working together. We started with obviously teaching together, and then we started doing workshops together, and then conference papers, and then joined article publications and things like that. And then over time we had enough material that when we found a gap in the literature, we were able to offer that one. And this actually in its field is one of the, if not the only one, is one of the few books in that area. One of the
And I just wanted to say real quickly
Okay.
that, no, that's fine. One of the challenges that we ran into, along with all the other challenges related to doing interdisciplinary work, is it was really hard to find someone who wanted to publish an interdisciplinary book.
Yes.
Because they couldn't put it in one pigeonhole.
Right.
It was
right.
really challenging. And in the interest of time, I won't go on with that. But that's
Right.
just
We can
another
talk about
point.
that one
Yeah.
if you're interested in the question and
Yeah.
answer period. But I think there are, universities, all of them, okay, yours as well, because we are all part of the
Yeah,
same
they're all the
Florida
same.
system. See, there is a very big gap between what they say and what they do. They're all encouraged interdisciplinary thing. They do not know what they're talking about, but they are encouraging it. It's like most of the people that we get into our field of international relations. They don't know what they're getting involved in, but they want it. And most of the people that we see that they hire them, they want something international. They don't know what it is, but they just want it. So in the title,
They want
see,
it, but they don't support it.
exactly. See, that's the
In any
challenge.
meaningful
That's
way.
the challenge. If, for example, we try to find people who are assistant professors, junior people who are just coming into the program, hopefully they have some other fresh ideas, etc., etc. It makes it very difficult for their promotion because, these interdisciplinary, what is a journal, they don't count as a part of your whatever. So you see, there are structural problems right there. Having said that, in a way, we have already kind of talked about our work with these things. If you want to mention a couple of words.
One thing that I've done recently with the University of Limerick and the University of Paris is we have the TechCom students at the University of Limerick and my technical communications students write documents together, and we work with students who are translators, who are studying to be translators at the University of Paris. And so they translate what the other students write. And that's been a great project because it's really important in the global world for my students who are going to be writers to know that what they write is probably going to be translated, and they need to write it in a way that it can be translated. Obviously, it's important for the translators to know how to work with writers, too.
Yeah. And I work with, Ghent University, which I mentioned. We had teleconferencing, which was very, very successful. We did that a couple of times. But unfortunately, those people who were teaching over there, they moved away. And the lesson I learned is you have to stick with people that you know for a long time. And I've been working with a university in Russia called Udmurt State University. This is in the city of Ijevsk, and we actually got a grant, State Department grant, many years ago. And the friendship that Madelyn was talking about really had led into collaboration. Now, the benefits to the students.
I think we've probably covered most of them. The final point I want to make is just that our ultimate goal for all of this is that when the students leave our classes, they won't just have learned skills or had experiences, but they will have a framework that they can apply for future global civic engagement so they can address global issues. Because to address global issues, we really need to do it from an interdisciplinary and an intercultural perspective, realistically.
Absolutely. And I think the skills, in most of our fields, in one way or another, students, they have to do critical thinking, they have to do problem solving. This is in addition to the typical, education they get in terms of improving their communication skills, oral or what, written. So I think this type of project not only is useful for the students, but also enriches in a way the faculty members. In fact, right now in our university, our president has these goals they call internationalization of the university. Not only the university is internationalized in terms of collaboration, teaching, faculty is doing the same thing with offering new courses, different perspective, and students are getting the same type of point. Thank you.
Thank you.